back to another great episode in the making here at IT Pro TV. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Wes Bryan, and in today's episode, we're coming back at you with more VMware. That's right, VMware Certified Professional version 6, and this is actually a part 2 on upgrading. Joining me back in the studios is none other than Mr. Don Pizzette. Don, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Wes. Ready to get in and finish what I started in the last episode. If you didn't watch it, we went through and we upgraded vCenter. I had a vCenter deployment that was running vCenter 5.5, and we upgraded it to vCenter 6. Now, that's an important step. It's, don't get me wrong, it is important, but it didn't really have any effect on our end users. Our end users aren't going to notice any changes, any new features or anything. It's just the management piece. Now it's up to us to really get in there and make a difference and upgrade the components that the end users actually experience. And as the second phase of our upgrade process, it's upgrading the ESXi hosts themselves. Now remember, if we're following VMware's official upgrade path, phase 1 is upgrade vCenter. Phase 2 is upgrade the ESXi host. That's what we're going to do here in this episode. Phase 3 is update our virtual machines, and Phase 4 is update our data stores. So that's the 4-phase approach that VMware recommends. We're in Phase 2. All right, so I've already upgraded vCenter. If we take a look at my deployment, I can see that if I jump into here I'll just go into host and clusters. I'll take my server and pull up its summary, and so I can see that my vCenter server is running version 6.0. And if I take a look at my host right here, ESX host 01, and I go into its summary, that I can see that it is running classic ESXi 5.0. All right. Now, 5.5 came out in between. I've got 5.0 here, ESXi 5.5 came out, now I want to go to ESXi 6. Do I have to go each step along the way to do more than one upgrade? No, I can jump straight from ESX 5 all the way up to ESXi 6. Now, that's not always the case. If I had an ESXi or an ESX 3.0 machine out there, I can't make the jump straight to 6, right? So there are certain limits of support there. But in this case, I'm going from 5 to 6. That is a supported upgrade path. If you're not sure, you can always go to VMware's website and pull up the requirements for ESXi, and it'll tell you what is supported and what isn't. So at this stage, I know that I can upgrade from 5 to 6. I just need to do it. All right. Now, doing it's actually not really that hard. In fact, the easiest method to upgrade an ESXi host is to go to the host and put in the ESXi install disk. So if I get an ESXi 6.0 disk, a CD, I can pop it in that server and I can reboot the server. And when I reboot the server, it's going to boot up off of that disk, and it'll see that I've already got a version of ESXi on there, and it'll upgrade it from whatever it's running now to 6.
Now, Don, in our lab environment that you're showing us here, I noticed that you got 2 or 3 of those ESXi hosts, and that's great with the disk installation. Now, what if I have 1,000? I'm going to have to get 1,000 of those disks?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, really, if you have 1,000 hosts, right? So I've got one here. If you have one host, you just go pop a disk in and that's it. Or if you have 2 or 3, like Wes said, yeah, you just pop a disk in. It works out great. But if you have 1,000, that's going to take a long, long time. And maybe you don't do them all at once, so you don't need 1,000 disks, right? But you take that one disk and you go host to host to host to host. It's going to take a while, right? So instead, we can use other things, right? Auto deploy. We covered auto deploy in another episode. If you remember, I showed how we can use auto deploy to deploy ESX to new hardware. So you get a new server in, it can deploy ESXi right on it. It can do upgrades too. If I've got an ESXi 5 box and I set up auto deploy to deploy 6.0, then the next time that 5 box boots up, it'll go and download 6.0 and it's upgraded. So I can use auto deploy, and now I just go around and reboot my hosts, right? That's easy, right? Or what is usually the better method is to use the VMware Update Manager. Now, we haven't covered the VMware Update Manager in any episodes yet, but it is a really sweet tool that's packaged as part of vSphere 6. So when you install vCenter, on that same install disk is the VMware Update Manager. It's not installed by default, though. You just have to install it. But once it's installed, it can connect out to all of your hosts, and it can push patches and updates. You can update your systems using it. Not just the host, but you can update virtual machines. You can update all sorts of stuff with it. So it's a really cool tool, and that's what I'm going to use here in this episode. Because auto deploy, well, just go watch our auto deploy episode. We've already seen how to do that. And the manual disk method, you just pop the disk in and boot up, press enter like 5 times, I think, and then it does the upgrade. It's pretty straightforward, but those aren't necessarily suitable if you're going to be upgrading a large amount of machines, right? The VMware Update Manager, that's the way to go. All right, so let's say that I want to make use of that. Well, my first problem is going to be that I don't have the VMware Update Manager, right? When I installed vCenter, I just installed vCenter. I didn't install the VMware Update Manager. So that's where we're going to have to kick up things, getting that installed and in place. So let me jump over to the vCenter server, and all we have to do is pop in that DVD, right? So I've got my DVD fired up here, and actually I think I've already got my auto run running. There we go. And so this is the auto run that we saw in the first episode, right? When I wanted to upgrade vCenter, I just popped in the DVD, and I chose vCenter Server for Windows right here and did the install, right? So that's how we upgraded in part 1. But what I need is the Update Manager. And so if you look right down here, we've got vSphere Update Manager, and there's 2 different components, the server and the download service. All right. Well, if we set up the server, it can do the downloading all right here in one place. If I want more than one update server, I can have a single download server that downloads and then distributes across them. It's up to me how I want to go. I just want to bring up a server. Now, the server does not have to be on the vCenter server. I can install the vSphere Update Manager anywhere, right? So I could have a dedicated vSphere Update Manager, or I could even install it on a virtual machine somewhere if I wanted it to run separately. I'm going to install it right here on my vCenter server because I have the resources. But be careful with that because the vSphere Update Manager needs a database. And databases tend to eat a little bit of RAM. So if you notice over here, it's got the embedded database option. And it's going to do a Microsoft SQL Server 2012 Express embedded database. So if I'm installing this on my vCenter server, now I've got 2 different databases on the same server, and that's going to eat up some resources. I might want to put this somewhere separate.
Don, in the first phase of this, you did show us that the database server that you were using was going to be the, the Postgres SQL, and here now we're seeing the Microsoft one, and you said that that isn't supported. So what gives on that one?
Yeah, so consistency is not necessarily a strong point of this process. With vCenter, in vCenter 5.5 and earlier, you could do the Microsoft SQL Server Express Edition, the free SQL database from Microsoft. And starting with vCenter 6, they don't support SQL Express anymore. Now they do the Postgres database, right? So they've changed vCenter to use Postgres. Unless you use an external database, then you can use Microsoft SQL or Oracle or whatever you want. The vSphere Update Manager is kind of the same way, except they still package it with SQL 2000 Express or SQL 2012 Express. So it does still support the Express Edition, even though vCenter doesn't. This is just the vSphere Update Manager. And the vSphere Update Manager can run completely separate from your vCenter server, so you can deploy it somewhere else. It doesn't have a prepackaged Postgres database, so we can't use that. I imagine they're going to change that in the next few years, but as of right now, it is just still separate. All right. So I have that option. I don't have another database server laying around right now, so I'm going to go ahead and choose to do that. If I don't check that, it's going to ask me to point to a SQL server somewhere to be able to connect to it and use it. All right. But now I can hit install, and it's going to launch the installer for this. And so here it gets going, and what it's going to do is it's going to install that SQL database first. And it doesn't take too terribly long. Everything that it needs is right there on the CD. So it's going to get deployed. It'll run some little scripts. You'll see some automated things kind of flip by as it does this. Once the database is done and installed, then we're ready to actually install the vSphere Update Manager. So this first stage here, this is all just part of getting SQL Express up and going. If I already had SQL Express on this system, then it would just be adding one more database to it, and this process would go super fast. It would already be done by now. But I uninstalled SQL Express when I did my upgrade, right? So now we had Postgres, we don't need this anymore, and so mine's got to churn along and do a little bit more. So it is able to skip the download, but it's going to have to do the install, and that process just takes a moment. Now, when it's done, then we'll actually install the vSphere Update Manager. And when the vSphere Update Manager is in place, we'll be able to connect it out to manage our vSphere environment. It'll see all of our hosts. It'll recognize that the hosts are running ESXi 5.0 or 5.5 or whatever, and then we can push the updates to it. All right. Now, unfortunately, the installation here for SQL does take a little bit of time, so I think we're going to leverage a little TV magic on this one to jump forward, because I don't want us to just sit here and watch the blue bar slowly crawl across the screen. So let's do that. I'm going to warp us forward, and then we'll continue on with the vSphere Update Manager install. So here we are just a handful of minutes in the future, and the SQL database install has finished. And once it's done, it'll disappear, and then up pops our vSphere Update Manager installer. So now we're actually going to begin installing the vSphere Update Manager. So you'll see a simple dialog box like what I've got pulled up right here. It's just the install shield for the vSphere Update Manager. And as we move forward, it's not really a complex thing. We're just going to click next a couple of times, and it's going to offer to download updates from default sources immediately after installation. You may or may not want that. If you want to manually control which updates are available in the Update Manager, then you can uncheck that and just add them in yourself. That gives you complete control. But even if it automatically downloads them, it doesn't mean it's rolling them out. You control the deployment. So it's typically fine to just leave that checked off. The time that I would leave that turned off is if I actually had a separate download server. Remember, we saw that in the install options I could do, well, it's actually back here, the download service. If I had a separate download service somewhere else, I wouldn't want this machine to download the updates right away. I'd go and set that up after the fact. All right, so I'll go ahead and hit next on that. Now, the vSphere Update Manager uses an IP address, username, password, and port to be able to connect to vCenter, right? The vSphere Update Manager could run on a separate system, so it needs to know how to connect up to vCenter. It's already got the IP address of my vCenter server and the port number, so I just need to give it a username and password. So I've been using administrator@vsphere.local, and I'll punch in my password. You'd punch in whatever single sign-on account you were using right there. All right. Then, if we've modified any of our ports, or if we need to modify the ports, we can do it right here. You'll see the SOAP, web port, SSL port. These are the ports that the VUM uses. Typically, I don't modify these because they're already weird enough numbers. I like it to be consistent across the VUMs that I work with. So you can change this if you need to. I'm going to leave mine at the default. Do note that if you have more than one IP address on your server, you'll be able to drop this down and pick, and also a host name. So I can pick my IP or host name. Hostname is important because if you're using SSL certificates, you want that name to match. If you browse in with an IP, it's not going to match. You'll get an invalid certificate. Now, for me, I'm using self-signed certificates, so it doesn't really matter which one I use. They're both going to throw up a warning, so I'll just leave it at the IP. And then the folders is going to install to. Now, the first one here is where it's going to install the Update Manager. The second one is where the downloads are going to go. The downloads can be pretty large sometimes, right? So you might want to put that off onto a separate hard drive, and it makes it easy to do that. And then we can finish that up. All right, so it's going to install the Update Manager. As soon as it's done, then we'll be able to fire this system up and start to deploy ESXi 6.0 out to our hosts. The first thing we're going to need to do is to identify our host and figure out how we're going to upgrade it. So while we're waiting on that, let me talk a little bit about how the upgrades work. When we want to do an upgrade, what we do is we create what's called a baseline. A baseline is basically a set of updates we expect a host to have. And when you create that baseline, so I'm going to create a baseline for ESXi 6.0. And then I can scan my hosts and compare them to the baseline. And if they match, great, they're done, that's it. But if it finds somebody that's running ESXi 5.5 or 5.0 or 4.1 or whatever, it's going to say that it doesn't match the baseline, and it's going to give me a chance to update them and bring them in line with the baseline. So remember how I said if it downloads the updates, it doesn't actually roll them out? That's true. It doesn't roll them out until we create a baseline that includes the updates. So we dictate when they roll out, and so creating a baseline is going to be one of the first things that we do when we get into the Update Manager. All right, now it just finished the install, so I'll go ahead and finish that. And now that it's done, I can just close out of this stuff, and we're ready to use it. One of the nice parts about it is it's just integrated right into the vSphere web client. Remember when we did the install, it asked for the vCenter data, and we gave it a username and password to link them together. They're linked. So now I can just go right into my vSphere web client. I'll be able to see the Update Manager and work with it. So I'm going to jump over to my client here where I'm logged into the vSphere web client. And what you should see, assuming the installation worked out the way it's supposed to, is you should see a new entry over here on the left side, and that's the Update Manager. And when you go into the Update Manager, well, that's going to load up. And there's my Update Manager server. And see how it's showing with the IP because I picked IP instead of name during the install. And so I see that server. I might have more than one update server. I just have the one. And when you go in here, you can monitor it to see its performance. That's not terribly exciting. And we can manage it, and that's what we need to do. When you manage it, you're going to see a number of different things that you can tweak. The important ones are these two guys right here, the patch repository and the ESXi images. Okay, the patch repository is where we store any of the update patches that come out for ESXi and the other vSphere products. But ESXi images, that's where we store our installation images to be able to load up ESXi and get our systems upgraded.
And Don, would there be a reason maybe to have more than one ESXi image or just a single image?
you'll probably find that you naturally just build up multiple images as time goes on, right? And so you certainly can. You can have more than one image in there, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there may be a reason for keeping it. You may have some particular need, like you've got an ESXi mixed environment where you've got 6 and 5.5, and you need to roll out another 5.5 host for some reason. And so you deploy that. If you still have the image, you can certainly do it. If you don't have the image now, you've got a problem. It just depends. So you may only need the latest and greatest in there, or you may want to accumulate more than one. All right. Now, because I haven't downloaded the updates from VMware, right, I'm going to need to manually put these in. So under imported ESXi images here, I'm just going to hit that little button to import it, and then that'll let me browse my hard drive and find the image, which I've got one laying around here somewhere. I've got an ISOs folder. And so I'm just going to come in and find that VM Visor install image. When you license ESXi, they give you access to download that ISO file, and that's all that we need to provide. And we can import that right into the system, and there it goes. It's going to upload it in there, and it'll become a part of that repository. Once it's in the repository, now I can deploy it out to machines as needed, and they'll have access. And oh, there we go. It had me worried for a second there. It was just sitting there at 0. But so it's going to deploy up, and now it'll be ready to rock. Now, it's still not going to roll this out. So when this gets uploaded, it's going to show as being in the repository, but nobody's going to get it. Nobody's going to get that installation. All right. Absolutely nothing happens in the VUM until you create a baseline. So I just uploaded that one. So now it shows that it's got an ESXi 6.0 update 2. I think for the really astute, I think update 3 is out now, but my disk was update 2. So I've got it thrown in there, and I'll just say OK to that, and there it is. Now, just having that disk is not enough, right? I now need to create a baseline to get that rolled out. And when I look at my tabs across the top here, I can find host baselines as well as VM baselines. I want host baselines. All right, now my hosts right now, well, actually I've only got one. I've got one host, and it's running ESXi 5.0. I've got ESXi 6.0, and I want to roll that out. So I'm going to need to create a baseline and get that put in place.
And Don, would you have a necessity to use more than one baseline, or would you just be using a single baseline?
Maybe if we had, let's say we had 1,000 hosts, and they were all running 5.5, and I wanted to deploy 6.0 to all of them, I could just use one baseline, right? But I might be packaging other updates with this. I might have, maybe I have let's say we have 100 hosts. I might have 10 hosts, that's my test environment. And then my 90 other hosts are considered production. So I might create one baseline for test and a separate baseline for production. And so I go to the test baseline and I add the ESXi 6.0 installer. And now they're going to upgrade to 6.0, but my production stays at 5.5. And only when I'm ready do I then go and edit the production baseline and change that to 6.0 also, and now they upgrade too. So if you want to divide your servers up for any reason, maybe it's different customers on different servers, or software packages, or just licenses. Maybe I don't have, maybe I have 100 hosts, but I've only bought 20 6.0 licenses. I only want to roll out 6.0 to 20 hosts, so I'll need to create a separate baseline for them, and you can attach the baselines to specific hosts, and then they'll get the update, other hosts won't. So yeah, there's a couple of different scenarios where you might want more than one baseline. But there's also a scenario where you just want one baseline. If you want all of your servers to have the identical software versions, you'll just have one baseline. All right. Now you'll see that I actually have 2 baselines already created. I didn't make these, right? These are a part of the default install. So you've got critical host patches and non-critical host patches, right? So I might want to roll out the critical host patch baseline to all of my hosts. So when VMware releases a critical update, we roll it out immediately. But my non-criticals, I might want to wait on those, right? Test them out, see, there's not really any benefit to me getting them unless there's some feature in there I specifically need. Or we can come through and we can create our own, right? So I might have a research and development or test group. I might have a production group or whatever. You create them based on the needs of your company, all right? So I'm going to create a new baseline just by hitting the little plus, and I'll give it a name. So maybe I'll call this my test group, right? So these are going to be ESXi servers that I've specifically got for testing new versions. And then down here, you can pick what you're pushing. Is it a patch, an extension, or an upgrade? A patch modifies something in ESX, right? Changes some functionality to fix a problem. An extension adds functionality, right? It's like a new feature. It could be drivers or whatever. And then the host upgrade, that's what I want. I'm upgrading from ESXi 5.0 to 6.0, right? I want to upgrade to a new version, so I'm going to choose that. It's a little more than just a patch. Then it's going to show me my ESXi images. If I'm going to be doing a host upgrade, I need an image, and I've only got the one. If I had more than one, here's where, when I answer Wes's question, if I have more than one image, I could be rolling 5.5 out to production while I'm rolling 6.0 into test, right? Or maybe I have 6.0 update 1 in production, and this is 6.0 update 2 that I'm rolling out into test, or whatever, right? So you can kind of base that on the needs of your organization. All right. Then I get my little summary here, not too much to see, and I can finish, right? So that baseline that I just made is super simple. It's just, hey, this is the installation image I expect you to have. And there it is created. So there's my test group, and its content is not a collection of patches, which are automatically downloaded from VMware, but an installation image that I put in there. Notice how the top two are dynamic, right? They're updating along with VMware, but the one I just made is fixed. I picked what's in it, and I picked just that ESXi 6 image. All right, so I've got it, and now that I've got the baseline, I can start to put people into it. I can actually assign hosts to it to get them upgraded. All right, now normally I jump right in and do it, but I want to show you guys something, and this is not on the exam, but in real life land, there's a little bug in vSphere 6, and it's in the current version. I'm not aware that they fixed it, that when you roll out the ESXi 6.0 host update to your hosts, it'll work. It'll deploy, it'll upgrade them, right? And everything will look fine on the host. But for whatever reason, they disappear from vCenter. They just disappear, they don't show up, okay? Well, what happens is the way that VMware handles their certificate timeouts changed a little bit in some of the newer updates, and it makes these hosts disappear, and it will freak you out the first time it happens. I rolled it out to a test environment, and the test environment disappeared. Just the whole thing gone. I thought I destroyed the test environment. So there's actually a little change we can make here in our user interface that'll stop that from happening. So I want to make that, and normally I do this stuff off camera, but it's a real life thing. I'm sure the VMware guys will fix this shortly, but if you're doing this right now, it's a problem that's out there. So I need to change one of my certificate timeouts. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to jump back up to my home page, and I'm going to go into Host and Clusters, and I'm going to pick my vCenter server. So my vCenter server is this Win Server 01. So I'm just going to pick that. I'm going to go to Manage, Settings, and Advanced Settings. And the advanced settings we haven't really messed with in this series, right? There's a ton of stuff in here that you can tweak that typically we don't want to tweak, right? We usually want to leave this stuff alone because you can really do some damage. But the one that I'm looking for is in here. I'm looking for VPXD. Let me get down to the VPXD. VPXD is a really big section because it's got a lot of the configuration in it. And I'm looking for VPXD.cert management. It's the certificate management. And what it does is it has a little value in here that's called the minutes before, this guy right here, okay? And what this is like a timeout when it goes to access a certificate, and it's set to 1,440 minutes, which is basically an entire day. And one of the new updates doesn't like that time, it's too big. Okay, so all you have to do is make that time smaller. And there's a VMware hotfix article that's for this. You can find it in the knowledge base if you search for it. But basically all it does is it tells you to change that and just make it something small, like 10 minutes. And so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to drop that down to 10 minutes. And oh shoot, now I got to scroll down to find it anyway. Well, job worth doing is worth doing twice, right? So let me find that minutes before. And I'm going to change it from 1440 down to a blazing 10 minutes. And I'll just say okay to that. All right, now you're not going to notice any functional difference here in your system, but what's going to happen is when we roll out ESXi 6 to that host, it's going to upgrade and we'll still see it in vCenter. And let me tell you, that's kind of a nice thing. You need to see that host. If you forget to do this, you can do the upgrade, the machines will all disappear, and then if you come and change this value, you can refresh your screen and they'll all magically reappear again, right? So it's kind of tied to that setting, kind of an important one. All right, now that we've got that done, let's actually do the upgrade that we set out to do in the beginning of this episode. So I need to get this thing upgraded. So what I'm going to do is, well, I guess I need to get back to my update manager. What I need to do is I need to get that baseline attached to my host. I've got ESX host 01, which is running ESXi 5.0. It doesn't know to upgrade it because it has no baseline. So I need to attach the baseline and get that put in place. So I'm going to come down here and find my test group baseline. And from here, I just need to get this one attached. Now, the way we attach it, you can do it from here if you have groups set up, or you can do it from the host itself. And doing it from the host itself can be a little bit easier at least, because you can kind of categorize things. So I'm going to go back out to my host and clusters, and I'm going to take ESX host 01. I'll go over here to manage. And when we linked to the update manager, not only did it add it to the vSphere web client, but it also added it to our settings in here. So when I come in and look at ESX host 01 settings, I can browse down, and the update manager is tucked away in here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, I forgot. It's not under the left menu. It's actually this nice big button right here staring at me if I would just click on that. So this update manager button, that didn't show up before. It's an extension that's been added on so we can see it. And from here, you can attach a baseline. Okay, so right now, we don't necessarily have any baselines attached. I'm going to go ahead and choose that, and I'll see the baselines. Now, cool thing about this, you can be attached to more than one baseline. I know I want to attach to this test group, because that's where I'm going to get my ESXi6 install, but I could also attach to critical hosts and patches. And now I'm getting upgraded and I'm getting patched, right? And if I had an extension baseline, I could attach to that too. So you can come in and check off all that you want to be a part of, and you can mix and match, all right? But for right now, I'm just going to upgrade ESX, and so that's the one that I'm going to choose. All right, so once I've got that in place, then we're pretty much ready to go and do the rest of our upgrade. As soon as I can get that little OK button to be on my screen, my resolution is just right. There we go. So I'm going to hit that, and it's going to attach the baseline. Now I can see right here, test group, right, is attached. It's a host upgrade. And if I look over here, my compliance status is currently unknown. Okay, I've attached the baseline, but even still, the baseline doesn't actually do anything. I have to tell it to check compliance, and it'll scan every host that has that baseline attached and show me whether anybody needs an update. All right, so that's going to be my next step here. I'm attached, and once you're attached, we can go in and we can scan for updates. And so you've got that nice little button right here to scan for updates. I'm going to hit that, and it's going to scan for updates. And I can, limit or restrict this if I want. I'll just leave it be, and now it's going to check. Okay, now what it should do is it should find that yes, there's the 6.0 update, and we're still running 5.0, so we need an update. And it takes just a moment. It's kind of working in the background, but when it's done, we'll see this compliance status change from unknown to let us know that we're not in compliance, that it's failed. And once it shows that, we'll be able to hit this nice little remediate button, and that's going to remediate us. And by remediate us, I mean it sees we're running 5, we should be running 6, and so it upgrades us to 6. Now the best part of that is that it'll be automatic. It just does it. If I have 100 hosts, and when I go to remediate them, it'll just remediate them. It'll do the upgrade. It'll do it all without me messing with it. And if I have the distributed resource scheduler, it'll even take the VMs, move them to another host, do the upgrade, and then move the VMs back. That way there's no downtime for the end users. You can actually be upgrading your host right in the middle of the day. It's pretty cool. All right, now mine failed. And mine failed in a bad way. So it failed in that it said incompatible. I have ESXi6, and it won't let me roll it out to this machine. It says that my hardware is incompatible with it. All right, well, why is that? Well, we can find out. If you click on it, you can come down here to your status details, and it'll tell you why. And I can see right here, 1 or more VMFS3 volumes has been detected, and it's not supported. Okay, it wants me to upgrade my data store from VMFS3 to VMFS5.
Now, Don, I've seen some of these ESXi hosts, and they are running the 6, and I know that they're compatible with the 3 version. What's the compatibility problem here?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in the storage episode, how ESXi6 does support VMFS3. You can do it, right? Why is it incompatible here? Well, unfortunately, it's a little bit strict on VMware's best practices. And VMware's best practice is you should be running VMFS5, not VMFS3. Now, this goes contradictory to their upgrade phases, right? Remember the phases. Phase 1, upgrade vCenter. Phase 2, upgrade your hosts. Phase 3, upgrade your virtual machines. Phase 4, upgrade your data stores. Data stores will last. But here, I can't upgrade my host unless I upgrade my data store first, right? So it's contradictory to VMware's actual phases. But in this case, I'm going to have to upgrade my data store before I can do that. Fortunately, upgrading a data store is not a hard thing to do. So I just need to go into my data stores and get that bumped up. Now, Unfortunately, it doesn't tell me exactly which data store it is that's my problem, but that's not the end of the world. I'm going to go over here to my related objects and data stores, and we'll find out real fast. There it is. Okay, so I've got 2 data stores on this server. One is VMFS5, one is VMFS3. So this guy needs to upgrade right here. So that's my problem child. And if we right-click on it, you'll see we've got that menu option right here to upgrade to VMFS5. Not a big deal, and we can go in and do that. It's going to validate that it will actually work. So I'll just check that one off and hit OK, and it's going to upgrade that one. It only takes a few moments, so we'll give it a minute while it does that. Now, I just upgraded out of hand. That's kind of a nice thing you can do when you're in a lab environment, right? But if I was in a production environment, I'd need to find out, why is that running VMFS version 3? That's pretty old. Is there a reason we still have it there? We may need to go and check our documentation and find out why. But if there's no other reason, then we should be able to update it. And I can see, there we go. So now I'm updated, and they're VMFS5. Okay, so with that in place, now I can jump back to the update manager where I still show as incompatible. But now if I scan for updates, it's going to refresh. And this time, it should show that I'm ready to update. Okay, and I'll be able to remediate. So I'm going to give that just a moment. It does take a second while it scans. And as soon as it does, then we'll be able to remediate. Pretty sure we have to wait for it to get happy again before it'll let me do anything. But once it's happy, then we'll be able to hit that remediate button. Let me see if we can just skip ahead and do it anyway. Sometimes it'll let you do it if you get impatient. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to hit the remediate button, and it's showing that I have an upgrade baseline that's out there called test group, and that's what it's about to apply. If I had more than one baseline, I could pick which one I was wanting to remediate. You don't have to remediate them all at once. And then as you advance forward, it's going to show you the host, and I can see that right now, whoops, if I can expand this, right now I'm running 5.0, and it's about to upgrade me to 6.0. And so I can hit next, agree to the licensing agreement, the standard part of the install, and hit next. And now it's just giving me what to do in case there's a failure, right? If we fail to upgrade to 6, you cannot roll back to your previous version, all right? In other words, if it fails to upgrade, it's broken. So you need to have a plan in place. Don't upgrade all your servers at once, because in theory they could all break at once. So we want to take them in groups and upgrade one group. Move your VMs off to a different host, upgrade that group, and then when it's done, move the VMs back. So it's just warning me about that. I can ignore warnings if I have unsupported hardware or no longer supported VMFS data stores. So if I wanted to stay at VMFS version 3, here's my chance, right? I could override it, right? That incompatible warning from earlier. I'm going to check to ignore it. Normally I wouldn't do that, but I'm just doing it here because I know it was still showing me as incompatible a minute ago. All right, then I can schedule it. I can do the upgrade right now, or I can schedule it to run after hours or on the weekend. I usually like to be around just in case problems happen, but you certainly can schedule it to happen after hours. All right. Then, host remediation options, right? We've got the option to change the VM's power state. If I have a virtual machine that's running, after the upgrade, what do I want? The default is to keep it running. But I could tell it to power off the virtual machines or suspend them and leave them that way, right? You can disable removable media. That's nice because sometimes you have a virtual machine that can get trapped because it's got some removable media attached to it. And if we have some kind of a failure going into maintenance mode, you can tell it to retry. So you got a few different options there, but we'll just go with the defaults and finish that one up. All right. So when that's done, now it's going to reach out and, oh, it actually did change. It showed incompatible earlier. Now it just shows non-compliant. And that's what I wanted. Now that we fixed that data store, it shows as non-compliant. So in the background, it's reaching out to that host. It's deploying ESXi6. It's copying it over the network. It's getting it loaded on that host. When it's done, the host will reboot. And when it reboots, it's going to boot up with ESXi 6.0. Then it's going to check back in with vCenter, and vCenter will update to reflect that. If I look at the icon over here, see the little yellow stripes? It's now in maintenance mode, right? So it moved that system into maintenance mode while it does the upgrade. Otherwise, my error logs would all fill up because that host would show as offline. Now it's doing the upgrade, and we just have to wait, right? It's something that does take a little while. If I look here, I can see I'm remediating the entity, and it's 20% of the way through, and it's just going to churn along and do that. Okay. Now, if I go and watch on the host itself, what do I see here? Absolutely nothing. Okay. And the reason is it's copying all those files over. It's stopping VMs or moving VMs or whatever it needs to do. All that's happening in the background. You won't actually see anything here until it reboots. And it really is just, it'll reboot, and it boots ESXi 6. So from the console, you really don't see much. Well, that right there, right? You see it reboot. And now that it's rebooting, it's actually going to boot into ESXi 6. And so once that comes up, then it's going to check back in, and we'll see that, that on our system. Now, it does take a moment. Here it's moving modules around, booting things up as part of the normal process, and right there you can see it, VMware ESXi 6.0, right? So just that fast, it's already upgraded, and now it's just doing a normal boot. Assuming we don't have any crazy driver failures or anything like that, this should come up and be happy. I'm going to use my IT operative word there of should as much as I can, because things can go wrong, right? What can go wrong? I might have fiber channel adapters that have custom drivers, and those drivers might not work under ESXi 6. Or I might have hardware that's no longer supported. Well, Compatibility Wizard should have shown that. But those are things that could go wrong here. Heck, when you reboot a server, having a hard drive failure is a pretty common thing. So something like that can just derail us altogether, but that's not really an ESXi problem. Assuming this boots, then back here in our web client, it should refresh and be fine. Now, it's got us out of maintenance mode while it's rebooting, so I've got my little red circle here letting me know the server's down, because at this point it should be booting back up, and it'll be happy. Now, once it comes back up, it's got to re-inventory, so it's not done. That's why it still says 22%. Technically, the host is upgraded, but we've got to re-inventory and verify that everything works, and that's what it's going to do automatically here in just a moment, as soon as that system is done. So at this point, we're kind of in a waiting game while that one boots, and we'll just let it run. So I think we'll use a little bit of the magic of TV here to jump ahead on this one so we don't have to wait. But basically, it's going to boot, the system will re-inventory, and then everything will show up, assuming we edited that advanced setting about the certificate timeout. If you don't, it's going to reboot, and the re-inventory will never happen. In fact, the host will just disappear, and that's the end of it, right? Until you go and edit that advanced setting we did at the beginning of the episode. All right, so we're going to jump forward in time, and as soon as this is done, we'll verify the upgrade and get ready to move to our next steps. All right, so here we are about 8 minutes in the future, and the ESXi host is done upgrading. I've got its console pulled up right here, so it is showing that it's running ESXi 6.0, and it's just up here at the, access this page via this URL type thing. It's at the normal console, and it's sitting there. Let's go take a look at good old vSphere. In my vSphere web client, I'm here at my host, and now it's showing as compliant, right? It upgraded. It finished the upgrade, it redid its inventory, and now it shows as being compliant. That host is running 6.0. It could have been one host, it could have been 100 hosts, right? However I wanted to roll this out, but now it's showing as compliant and remediated. All right. Now notice, and this is something we always want to verify, when you do an upgrade, always verify it finished completely. In my case, it actually didn't finish completely because my host is still in maintenance mode, right? If it's still in maintenance mode, I'm not going to be able to start up virtual machines on it. I'm not going to be able to manage the VMs that are on it. So I need to get it out of maintenance mode. Normally it'll come out on its own, so I'm probably just being impatient here. If I waited a little bit, it would come out. But since it's just sitting there, I'm going to go ahead and just right-click on it and go to maintenance mode and exit maintenance mode. And that's going to bring it back into production, unless I get an error, right? Which is always possible if something happens, but nope, it exited. You'll see the little yellow bars disappear from the icon, and so now it's back into production, right? So now I've successfully upgraded this one to ESXi 6.0. And if ESXi 6.5 comes out, I just do that same process. I load the ISO image into the vSphere Update Manager, and then I change the baseline. You just go and edit your baselines that you made. So if I go back to my home page and I go down here to my Update Manager and I come in and I hunt down that baseline that we made, here's the baseline, and you can edit the baseline, and on that next page you would just pick your new image. So as new versions come out, you just change it right here, and now my test servers get the new version. So I don't have to go and reattach these to the host. I don't have to create new baselines every time. I just modify the existing baselines. But do you remember what I said? Create a test group first. Roll out to test servers. Make sure it works, and then roll it out to the rest of production. Don't just go cowboy style and roll it out to everybody. It doesn't usually end well.
Don, we appreciate you taking the time to show us and make it a little bit easier upgrading your ESXi host. Phase 2 complete. And speaking of complete, it does look like we're coming to the end of another episode. But before we do, you got any parting words that you'd like to let them know about upgrading their hosts?
All right, well, just like Wes said, right, this is phase 2. We have 4 phases. We still haven't upgraded our virtual machines, and we still haven't upgraded our vSwitches, right? So we still have more to do. But on the host side, remember that warning. This is an upgrade path. There is no downgrade path. VMware doesn't give us a way to downgrade the hosts that are attached to vCenter. So make sure that you've got other hosts standing by if necessary, or that you're ready to blow away a host and reinstall if need be to get back down to 5.5 if that's where you've got to be. So just be aware that there is no downgrade path.
Well, Don, as always, thank you for joining us in the studios, and look forward to seeing part 3, and we look forward to seeing you there. But signing out for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Wes Bryan.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
And we'll see you next time.